The 15-Point Plan is part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network.
Welcome back to another episode of the 15-Point Plan podcast. My name is Ryan Greigg, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jacqueline Smith. And today we are super excited because we have another guest joining us today. In fact, we have another guest that I'm super excited to hear from and learn from because our guest has been a big advocate for the 15-Point Plan over the last few years, and they have learned some things with the 15-Point Plan. They've adapted it, and I'm just excited to hear how this has impacted their life, the points that they have the most fun with, and maybe even the points that they find the most challenging, because that's always a fun subject to talk about. Right, Jacqueline?
Always. Hello, everyone. And I'm so excited and honored to introduce our guest today. Maisie Mader is here with us. Her and I worked together and we met a few years back. And Maisie, you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello.
So I'm going to interview Maisie today, and we're going to hear how she learned about the 15-Point Plan and her journey with it. And we'll just see where this takes us. So Maisie, tell the audience listening today how you got introduced to the 15-Point Plan and a little bit about your journey with it.
Yeah, totally. So I first met Jacqueline, who's the one who's introduced me to it, like 3 years ago. And I was interviewing to join her real estate team 3 years ago. And probably like a month after I interviewed, I got in a traumatic event. And just the brief summary, I was in an emergency plane crash landing, and that like really rocked my world, as it would most people. And at the time, a lot of people were sharing their ways of coping with stress and their ways of coping with traumatic events with me. And it was a lot of like grandiose ideas, which I'm not going to say that those don't work, but it was a lot of things of like going to this retreat or going to this like 1 week long experience where you figure out death and all this stuff. And I was open to that, and I've done things like that before. But what I find is that a lot of people do those things. They're okay for maybe 2 weeks, and then they start slipping back into all of the emotional distress. Because the truth is, you don't just like get over something like that in a week from like one giant therapy thing. It's something that you have to work on every day. And from what I experienced, it was affecting my daily life in everything I did. It was not just like when I would get into a moving vehicle or an airplane that I would get really freaked out. It was all the time. So I was I was in a rut, and I wasn't doing well, and I was just laying in bed. And I felt like I couldn't move. And Jacqueline introduced the 15-Point Plan to me, not as like a cure-all, but as a way to get through the day. And that eventually, if I get, all these pieces of me that make me a person and make me whole, that dealing with the bigger stuff gets easier. And that when I'm taking care of myself and I'm taking care of my body and my mind, I actually have the capacity to sit down with a therapist and like talk about the traumatic stuff. And then I'm more focused when I'm dealing with that. So she introduced that to me like 3 years ago. And then I joined her team a year later. Yeah,
it was a journey.
Yeah.
Definitely a journey. And I'm so glad that you did. And so tell us how it went, like you first started, and then what were the effects of it, and how long did you take to feel better? Like, just tell us a little bit about that experience with it.
Yeah. So the whole point from what I had, like figured out during the beginning of it was just try it for 30 days. Like try it for 30 days. And all these other things that everyone was telling me to do would also equal out to 30 days, like going on this month-long retreat for 30 days. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can commit to this for a month. And if I'm not willing to commit for this for a month, there's a bigger issue going on. So I jumped into it in a really scheduled way. I printed out the like tracker, and I put it on my refrigerator. since I lived in a 400 square foot apartment and I could see it every single day in front of me. And I set timers on my phone to like get me to do the things in the beginning, because in the beginning, just getting out of bed was hard. So, like starting the day with mindfulness and gratitude was really helpful. Then I think I would go to the gym, and then I would do my like continuing courses for real estate, because I was still studying for my test, and it was really structured in the beginning. And I was doing that for probably 6 months, I want to say, like 5 or 6 months. And then eventually it just falls into your routine, and you don't
Yep.
really need to set the timers, and you don't really need to remind yourself to do it. It's just part of what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being willing to come on and share. I know that you are doing amazing now, and it's still challenging to talk about that
Yeah.
time. So I just want to say thank you for being willing to share with our listeners and with Ryan and I such a challenging time of your life. And it's been such an honor for me. I remember just feeling so impressed by this woman who, first for sharing with me that you were having a hard time, and then for being willing to commit to this for 30 days. And I knew right then, I was like, I want to be partners with this kind of person that will take these challenges and, do what she can control. Because there's a lot of things in life that we cannot control, but you did what you could control. And, look at you now. So good job.
I appreciate
Yeah. So eventually you stopped doing the 15-point plan, right?
it.
Maybe doing some of the things that did become, like you said, habit, but stop tracking and
Yeah.
all of that. And I actually reached out to you recently to ask you if you'd do this podcast, and I was thinking primarily about the story that you had shared about back when you had the plane crash, and then used the 15-point plan to get back on track. And you shared with me that it was kind of funny that I had reached out because the day before you had just re-engaged with the 15-point plan. So tell us about that, because we haven't even talked about it really.
Yeah, totally. So it's something, and I've done this before where I've like gone back on it in a structured way at times.
Mhm,
And I find that it's like really helpful to get me grounded again, when I'm going through a lot of intense changes.
mhm,
And right now, like I'm getting married in September. I'm doing this like production challenge in our company, and I'm handling a different level of like workload than what I've handled before. And
mhm,
I started to get like really just honestly like depressed a week
mhm.
ago. And I wasn't laughing. I was getting kind of bitter about like gratitude stuff. And that's not my regular routine. And that's not my regular person. And it was really obvious, like to my partner, that I was not thriving.
Yeah.
So I jumped back on this in a structured way, because
Mhm,
that's what's worked before. Um, and I think like the laughter part of it, like, when you like set a timer and you like try to get yourself to laugh for 30 seconds and then you end up doing it. I think the
mhm.
whole challenge, or like the whole 15-point plan, is like that, where if you just start doing it and you like consistently get yourself to do this every day, eventually it falls back into place and things start clicking, and it makes the stress more manageable. And I have more clarity around these challenges that are coming up.
Yeah, that's really, really smart. I always say that it's not really the stress, that the things, the particular things that are stressing us out, because I've had times in my life where I've had like super stressful things going on and I felt like less stressed out than when I've had like stressful, but maybe not as big of things going on, and where I was like, more stressed out with the littler things kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I know like it's an energy thing, because I loved what you said about like then you have the capacity to
Mhm.
handle. And so I always say the 15-point plan is a system to manage our energy. It
Yeah.
doesn't make our stress go away. It helps us be able to handle things, life, right,
Yeah.
in a more powerful way.
Mhm.
So what would you say to people, like you said, who maybe are kind of bitter toward, I was sharing on our last episode, Maisie, you'll have to listen to it because I was sharing about how I kind of get bitter towards gratitude too when I'm in that mood. And so what would you say to people who kind of feel like that maybe about the 15-point plan, or they try it for a week and they fall off? What would your advice be?
Yeah. Um, nothing genuinely, nothing good comes easy in life. And if you actually want a better life for yourself, or you actually want to be a better partner, or you actually want to, like really help your health, that's not gonna it's not going to be an easy overnight fix. And those things are habits that you have to set within yourself. And I really look at this from like a self-love perspective. Like if I really truly love myself, I'm willing to do the hard things for myself. And I don't really look at the 15-point plan anymore as like a structure. I look at it as self-care. Like a lot of people think of self-care as like taking a bath every night, and that's, with all the stuff, and that's totally self-care too. But for me, this is my self-care.
Yeah,
And this is how I show love to myself every day, by giving myself my 15 most important needs to be
yeah,
a functioning human. So I think if you're committed to yourself, and you explore your relationship with yourself, it'll kind of naturally lead to that.
that's really smart. I love that. Is there anything I haven't asked you that, and I'll let Ryan ask you a couple questions too, but is there anything that you want to share that I haven't asked you or prompted you to share yet?
Um, no, not really. I would just say, like, if people are struggling with the idea of doing, like, everything, because some of these are maybe things you've never practiced before. Like, I know when I was younger, I let go of all of my hobbies for a while, and it took me a while to rediscover it. Like, try 5.
Mhm.
Like, you don't need to do
Yeah.
15. Maybe try 5 to start with,
Mhm.
and you can expand from there.
That's good. That's good
Mhm.
advice. Definitely. Progress over perfection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Ryan, do you have any questions for Maisie?
Maisie, this has been really neat to just hear how you talk about all this. You speak about it very naturally, almost as if it's just something we should all be doing. And I love how you said that if I truly love myself, I'll do the hard things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I agree with you that we have this idea of self-care as the extra stuff, but you're calling it, no, this is like my most, you said my 15 most important needs. That
Yeah.
is a different look than I think a lot of people have of some of these things of like, well, I'll get to those if I have the time, or I'll get to those. Wouldn't that be nice to get to that? But you're saying, no, no, no. Like these are the things that we need to do.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I love how you called you notice this with yourself. You're like, I'm not laughing, I'm not thriving. I need to do something
Mhm.
about this. And you went back to your structured, your
Mhm.
quote unquote scheduled way, which I think is important for all of us to realize as listeners, that if you're trying to add 15 things to your life, you got to have a system. And you said specifically, I have a scheduled way. I printed out the tracker. You can go to winmakegive.com. You can print out that 15-point plan. And on the back of that PDF, there's a tracker. So you did that, you scheduled it, but then you even took it a step further and you set the alarms on your phone to remind you. So
Mhm.
you nailed it the way you set all this up. And I agree with you. It's like, oh yeah, like we had this, and as Jacqueline said, thank you for sharing this, because I imagine it's not super easy, and what you've gone through is incredibly powerful, that you have risen through all of this. Uh, Maybe yeah, you could go on this like week-long trip and do these things and these vast things, but you took the harder approach and the longer term approach, and I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful. So I just wanted to commend you for that, and for getting through what you've gone through, and becoming such an amazing person along the way. I guess the question is, what's the hardest point for you to get?
Um, Honestly, probably serve. Like we do outreach through the team that I'm on with Jacqueline, and I don't do any of it outside of the team, and that's something I do want to work on. And I'm not like perfect. Sometimes I hit the snooze button on some of these things. um,
Maisie, just kidding.
but yeah, probably serve and journal too. But that's only because my writing journals slowly turn into scrapbooks, and then it's a scrapbook and not a journal anymore. So
Sure, sure. Well, Maisie, if I may, I think that you would offer a lot of service in sharing what you shared on this episode with people in your daily life. I think that you have a lot of wisdom that you've learned from this. And I think that it would be, you could check your point every single day by taking just a minute or two of what you said on this podcast and sharing it with some people along your daily conversation. So that's an easy way for you to check that box on the service box there. But you really have a lot of wisdom on this topic. And I'm glad that Jacqueline had the idea to bring you on here because I've learned a lot today.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
What's your favorite point?
Hobbies for sure. Jacqueline knows I am a not so secret nerd. So I spend a lot of time in my nerd hobbies every evening, and that brings me so much joy. So probably hobbies.
I love
I
that.
love
What
that.
was one of the points that you thought was going to be super hard that now is not so hard and you've learned to love?
Um, Sleep and movement. I wasn't sleeping at all in the beginning of everything. And that usually gets affected first when I'm really out of
Hmm.
control. And about a week ago, I started mouth taping to keep me in my deep sleep at night. So that's something that I've put in a lot more thought into, which just shows more progress in one way.
Yeah. So now you got to tell us more. How has the last week been with your mouth tape, which we haven't actually covered much on this episode, Jacqueline? So some of our listeners might be going like, well, what the heck are you talking about? But fill us in. What does that mean?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I've been like just doing so much research about like your air circulation when you sleep, and I have this problem of mouth breathing at night. And it increases your cortisol levels when you mouth breathe. You don't get into a deep REM cycle. You're like waking up all the time, and your face structure is also different. You get sick more often, all the above. So I bought this like athletic tape on Amazon, and I look terrifying. But every night I put tape on my mouth, and I have been sleeping fully through the night now, from like consistently 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. And it's really impactful.
Wow.
You mentioned this, and maybe you're referencing the book, but for our listeners, there's a great book called Breathe,
Mm.
written by James Nestor, and it references a lot of what you just mentioned. You know, what's super funny is they sell some of that mouth tape, and one of the brands is hostage tape. Yeah. Yeah. So it's this weird thing going around right now. Like, yeah, you could go buy hostage tape to tape your mouth shut while you sleep, but it's a really big thing. And that's another episode that we'll cover on mouth
Yeah.
breathing and the impacts of it to our facial structure, to so many things in our life. So I'm glad you brought that up, Maisie. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Well, thank you for coming on again, Maisie, and thank you everyone for listening. We wanted to bring in some people that are near and dear to our heart that have been impacted by the 15-point plan. So stay tuned for more episodes and more people sharing their stories. And as always, you can find me on Instagram, Jacqueline Ray Smith, and we have Ryan, part Greigg. I always want to say Bentley's old man, which we still have to talk about. And you can find the 15-point plan trackers that Maisie talked about at winmategive.com/15-point plan. And you can tune into other Winmate Give podcasts there too. And thank you so much again for listening. And thanks, Maisie, again for being here.
No, thank you.
That's right. And hey, Maisie, where can our listeners find you if they have more questions on your 15-point plan, or if they need to buy or sell real estate? Where can they find you online?
My website is maisie.evergreenrealestatepartners.com.
Perfect. And are you on social media or anywhere else that they can find you online?
Sort of. Yeah. I'm on Instagram too. I'm trying to get better about being more active about it. It's Maisie Mader I guess my handle is just Maisie Mader.
Got it. We will find you, Maisie. I'm going to share your page for when I'm on there so that people can find you, because I do believe you shared a lot of wisdom on here. And we all checked our laugh point off for the day.
Yes. So, thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you again, Maisie. Bye, everyone.